Welcome back to the Social Web TV, and we are on location again at Google headquarters with a special guest from Yahoo. Is that social web enough for you? Eran Hammer, welcome.
Nice being here.
And in the news this week, OAuth, something we've talked a lot about before. We thought it'd be a good chance to describe some of the stuff that's going on. You might have read a bit of coverage here or there, and we want to make sure that the true story gets out there about what's going on right now with a security issue around OAuth.
And I think of all the episodes we've done, the OAuth deep dive we did back early on was probably the least successful episode to date.
The low point, if you will.
Yeah.
So to all 10 of you who watched that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I
it could
wasn't
have been canceled.
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
It's probably because we didn't have Eran on.
Yeah.
So
And a lot more people are using it now.
who wants to tee this up, tell us a little bit about what is in fact going on here?
Well, maybe you want to set the context, Eran?
So about a week ago, we identified a security threat involved in OAuth. It was based on basically a review of the spec. It wasn't based on any actual attack or exploit that were going on. So there's nothing bad happened, but we looked at it, and what kind of got us thinking a little differently, because this has been out for about a year and a half now, the spec, and nobody has really identified it.
A lot of pretty smart security people have looked at OAuth, right? I mean, it's not just like something we kicked out there.
And actually a few community members have noticed it, and there's a blog back in November, there's a blog about 2 weeks ago, but people didn't put, everything together and realize, so that a lot of it was about, here's something that you should worry about and really take care when you're writing an application to do it well, but they didn't really put everything together to say, you know what, there's actually nothing you can do to do it well because there's a problem with the protocol itself. What really triggered the new use case for the protocol was when Twitter started playing with OAuth, and the way they used it basically brought to our attention a different approach, a different way of looking at it, that just fresh eyes or fresh use case brought it up to our attention. And then the way we handled it is we use the community resources, the OAuth wiki, to identify what providers are out there. We looked at the mailing list to see who has been talking about it.
The code repository.
Yep. And what we did is we basically contacted all the providers as the first round of who is really being exposed here to handle it. And we've been coordinating with about 50 people from 25 or more companies, about 25 companies, since Friday.
Who have live endpoints.
Who had live deployments.
This is, Google, Yahoo, MySpace, Twitter, Blackstone,
et cetera.
So
yeah,
Netflix,
Netflix,
Flickr.
a pretty mainstream set of companies by now.
Yeah, I mean, and they're a mix of big and small. Yammer, PhotoBucket, Smugmug. I mean, the companies that people don't really associate with OAuth are using it. And we actually discovered 3 new companies that are using OAuth. We had no idea up until now. That is pretty cool.
Good tip for future spec developers if you really want to know where the deployment is. Put out a fake security threat, and then they'll come out of the woodwork. I'm not saying I recommend that, but
You might lose credibility very quickly,
yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so how bad is the situation?
So the severity of the threat is really based on an individual case-by-case basis, and you can see how different companies are reacting to this. And it depends how you view privacy, what's your policies. The basic threat is based on, it's not based on stealing passwords, not based on stealing any secrets or credentials.
So is this like phishing or something, or?
So we don't use the word phishing for this because phishing tends to put people at ease and kind of mislead them to say, well,
it's like a lullaby.
If I'm smart, I know I'm at PayPal.com, so I can't be phished, And this is not really that kind of a thing.
There is an attitude by people who consider themselves smart, and unfortunately most people think they're smart, is that they can be phished. And because phishing is for stupid people. And so if you think you can be phished, and I say this is a phishing attack, and it's like, whatever, I'm not going to pay attention to that. But this is actually, in a way, it's a social engineering exploit.
Okay.
That is basically based on the idea that OAuth has 3 parts to it. You go to an application, you say, I want to use it. And then you're being sent over to the provider where the data is to authorize the application to see your data. So if you think about an address book, you can go to an application that will, show your address book in pretty colors. and you want to use your Gmail address book or your Plaxo address book or your Yahoo address book, you tell the app, please get my address book here. So you go over to the provider and you authorize access to get your address book, and then you call back to finish the process. So you start, you authorize, and then you return. And then the problem is that the way those 3 steps are bound together is not secure. And
Secure enough.
So basically, like with a little like sleight of hand, someone could come through that 3rd step and grab the token that you just authorized.
Well, so no. What's happening is that somebody coming up front
Okay.
and basically saying, I'm a good guy, really a bad guy, and starting the process. So he's being told, go authorize it, and instead of that person going authorize it, he's tricking you into authorizing
Got it.
Thinking that you're doing it for yourself.
Sure.
But since he started it,
And
when you authorize it, you're authorizing him access to your account. That's kind of the essence of it.
I don't actually have access to your account. What I have is access to the application who
That has
thinks
access to
I'm
your
you.
data. Got it.
And now the reason why we don't call it phishing is because when I trick you, and the way I can do it is very simple. I can grab that URL, and I can put it on my blog, and I can write saying, if you heard about this awesome new app that will go and import your address book, and you're gonna say, oh yeah, I want to try it out. So you're gonna click on the link, and you're gonna show up at Yahoo or Plaxo or Google,
Wherever.
and it's gonna ask you to sign in. And you're a sophisticated user who doesn't get phished, so you're going to so you're gonna go check, oh yeah, I'm at the right place.
Yep.
You're gonna log in. It's gonna ask you, do you want to authorize access to this application?
You're like, yep, that's the app I wanted to authorize.
And it can be even worse because this might be an app that the vendor's verified.
Yeah.
So that's actually guaranteeing to you that
it's a
this
good
is the
app.
app you want. And so you go and you say yes. As soon as you say yes, the bad guy who started it, who tricked you, now has access to your data through the application. So they don't have direct access to your data, but they have access to your data through the application.
So you could revoke access at a later point, but the fact is that you've been exposed the moment that it happens. And I think what you're saying in terms of this not being phishing is that the usual signifiers or signals that you look for in the browser that will tell you, no, this is actually PayPal with spelled with a 1 instead of an L,
Right.
no longer can help you.
Well,
Because everything looks the same because you're actually in the right places.
Yeah.
Yes, and so basically, there is no way. Once you ignore how you got to authorize, if you don't make that connection, then basically you are in a safe place, and everything you're expecting is there. So there's absolutely nothing that will help you detect that you're being attacked.
So
There's
what
nothing
is the likelihood of this actually happening in the wild?
Um,
Because this hasn't happened. There's been no exploits so far. So what are we looking at in terms of the actual vulnerability there and somebody actually getting exposed to this?
So to pull the social engineering attack, people need to be tricked into doing this.
And this happened with Twitter a little while ago, where people were like posting tiny URLs that would then post something back to their account. And so Twitter actually closed that problem, but the idea was that you could basically post something by just clicking on a link.
Right.
Okay.
And it can be even worse if a website makes you go to a link without you actually doing something, depending on what measure the website the provider is taking. So if the provider, for example, with this particular attack, skipping the sign-in page if you already have a cookie and signed in, then you might not even see anything. Because you can go to my blog and I can just automatically redirect your browser to somewhere and then somewhere else, and then it's completely transparent. So that's why the attack is actually important to identify. To actually carry it out is pretty complicated on most services because the timing issues and some of the other details, a lot of the providers have put.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
And because you've alerted these people, they've all taken precautions to narrow that window of time when you can execute the attack as small as possible and put extra advisory messages on their site. So, I mean, hopefully we've done a lot of practical harm reduction.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple things I want to make sure we get to. One is I know you guys are here today in order to address what sort of changes you need to make to the spec in order to make this go away. But in the meantime, either what should people do or what should the providers do in order to minimize the severity of this risk?
So the one activity, the one measure that all the providers took is to work on user education. So from basically from the past 2 days on until this is going to be plugged, when you go to authorize access,
To some application.
to a new application.
Yeah, because it's worth pointing out, if you've used OAuth in the past, that part of it is totally secure. If you've already authorized the app and it's just fetching your data for you, that part is totally secure. It's only when you're going to grant access for the first time that you might be susceptible to this sort of a social engineering attack.
Yes. So when you do that, you're probably going to get even scarier authorization page that will say, if you did not come to this page from a trusted source, for example, if you clicked on a link in an IM message or email message or a blog, then probably that should be suspicious that you got to this page and not from the actual application.
Right.
Maybe you shouldn't go through with it. So that's what most companies are doing. They're putting some back-end measures to detect attacks, because this attack in many cases requires a lot of failed attempts by the attacker. So if you can detect some weird activity going on, you can monitor it. And in terms of a fix, we have an open community and we are actively discussing it. Since yesterday, there's been about 100 messages posted on this topic on the public list, and everybody's invited to come and participate. What we're doing today is we're basically just having a brainstorming session that's sometimes easier to do in face-to-face with a lot of the people who have been involved in the first spec, and they understand the history a little better and the context of why we made some of the decisions in the original spec, so we can come back to the community with a little more processed input.
So basically, anybody that's implemented OAuth could essentially get together in their company or with other companies that are, let's say, local to them. There wanted to be an East Coast meetup or someplace international that people got together and then brought back, some ideas, proposals, suggestions to the mailing list to further discuss. That's essentially what we're doing today, right?
And that to me is the sort of the silver lining in all of this. Besides the fact that I think it's just, as we all know, anyone who's been in this industry, no security measure is ever 100% foolproof, and so over time things get figured out and they have to be patched. But the fact that there's actually now quite a vibrant community means that you've all of a sudden got these, incredibly smart security people from all these different companies putting their heads together, trying to fix this as fast and as well as they can. And then once whoever in the community together comes up with that solution, we'll all be able to benefit from it. We'll get all the libraries updated. So especially for the smaller players who don't necessarily have the horsepower to figure out all the security stuff on their side, this is a great example of how they can kind of ride the wave by being part of this open community rather than everyone having to figure this out if they were all using their own beautiful snowflake of solutions. So I think that's actually kind of nice to see.
And I want to make one more last point, is that the news broke a little earlier than we wanted as a result of Twitter shutting down some of their services, and everything Twitter does these days gets a lot of attention.
So they took a lot of heat for this.
And what was remarkable, it's absolutely remarkable, is that this is a company who is really sensitive to bad PR and to this kind of attacks against them, and they really have to address these, like all companies need to. But because we've asked them, and we is basically just the community, we've asked everybody to keep this quiet and not to reveal the threat as long as possible
until a certain time.
Because at the time that the TechCrunch piece came out and the CNN piece came out, not all the providers have deployed their solutions yet. It wasn't fully addressed, and they were racing.
It could make the situation worse.
Yes,
yeah.
and basically, I just want to express my personal and I think I speak for behalf of everybody, how grateful we are for the way Twitter handled this situation and the way that basically they took a PR hit. So other companies will not take a security hit, which is really remarkable and very noble way to companies to behave.
Well, what a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us, Eran.
My pleasure.
And there's a lot going on. Please make sure you join us next week for another exciting episode of the Social Web TV.